Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Srilakshmi P.S., Senior Lecturer, Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics. I'm talking about amalgam restorations. I'll be discussing detail on the various steps of class 1 cavity preparations. To begin with, what is class 1 cavity? So, according to G.V. Black, a class 1 cavity is one wherein it includes occlusal surface, buccal and lingual pits of the posterior teeth and the lingual surfaces of the anterior teeth. So this is an example of the various class 1 cavities according to G.V. Black. Now what do you mean by the tooth preparation? So according to Stevens, tooth preparation is defined as the mechanical alteration of a defective, injured or deceased tooth to receive a restorative material that re-establishes the healthy state for the tooth, including aesthetic corrections where indicated, and the normal form and the function are re-established. Stages of tooth preparation. The tooth preparation can be divided into two stages. First one is the initial stage and then you have the final stage. Initial stages consist of 4 steps, whereas final stage consists of 5 steps. The first step in the initial stage is to give an outline form and initial depth. Second one is primary resistance, primary retention, and finally you have the convenience form. Whereas in the final stage you have removal of any infected or affected infected tinting and old restorative materials, and second one involves to provide pulp protection. Second procedure, the next procedure is to remove to provide secondary resistance and retention forms, procedures for finishing the external walls, and finally the procedures include cleaning, inspection and desensitization. Before we go into the depths of the cavity preparation, let us see what are the walls that we have for a class 1 cavity. You will have a facial, lingual, distal, nasal and a pulpal floor. Then it is very important for us to know how many line angles and point angles are there in a class 1 cavity. Now what are the various clinical techniques for a preparation of the class 1 cavity? First you have the outline form. What do you mean by outline form? It is to give a outline with gently flowing curves and distant cavo surface margin, and here it is necessary we maintain the width not more than 1 to 1.5 millimeter and a depth of 1 to 1.5 to 2 millimeter. The pulpal flow depending on the enamel thickness is almost always in the dentin. So this is an example of how an outline form is given, and an initial depth of 0.2 to 0.8 millimeter into the dentin is given. Into the DEJ is given. Second one is a resistance form. So what do you mean by resistance form? It is the form that we give to the cavity preparation so that both the tooth structure can resist forces directed in the long axis of the tooth and to provide a strong stable seat for the restoration. It should have a minimal extension into the external walls, extending around the cusp to conserve the tooth structure and prevent the internal line angles from approaching the pulp horns too closely. Another feature in which we can give resistance forms are extending the outline to include fissures, placing the margins on relatively smooth, sound tooth structure. Another feature is to keep the facial and the lingual margin extension as minimal as possible between the central groove and the cusp tips, minimally extending into the marginal ridges without removing any dentin that supports the tooth. Strong ideal enamel margin should be established, that is extending the outline form to include the enamel undermined by caries. Cavo surface margin of 90° and extending a weak wall of enamel by joining two outlines that come close together, that is within a 0.5 millimeter apart. Using enameloplasty on the terminal ends of shallow fissures to conserve tooth structure. Sufficient depth of 1.5 to 2 mm is necessary in adequate thickness of the restoration, providing resistance to fracture and wear. Rounded internal preparation angles are also necessary. Now, what do you mean by retention form? The parallelism or slight occlusal convergence of two or more opposing external walls provide the primary retention form. So what do you mean by retention form? Retention form is that form of the cavity which enables the restoration to withstand any other tipping forces. So another feature that you can give is the dovetail. Convenience form is actually very important. It is just the adequate amount of space that is necessary to provide adequate access and visibility and conveniently work through the cavity preparation. So here a dovetail, this diagram shows the picture of the dovetail, and here you can also see the preparation walls that are only having a occlusal convergence but only to a degree of 2 to 5 degree. The armamentarium. So what are the main burrs that we require? First one is a 245 burr and a smaller burr, that is number 330 burr. So the 245 burr has a length of 3 millimeter and a tip diameter of 0.8 millimeter. Whereas a smaller burr, that is a number 330 burr, is recommended to prepare a more conservative tooth preparation. The silhouette of the number 245 burr reveals sides are slightly convergent towards the shank. This provides the natural occlusal convergence that we require on the facial and the lingual walls. So this is a diagram of a number 245 burr, and also you have a 330 burr. The slightly rounded corners of the number 245 burr produces rounded internal line angles, which will provide the necessary feature which is necessary to prevent any fracture to the occlusal forces. The number 330 burr is used for a more conservative cavity preparation, and it is a smaller version of the number 245 burr. Now the various hand instruments that you can use are the hoes and the hatchets. Here you have hoes, hatchets, chisels, etc. So the various steps include: first one, giving a punch cut using the number 245 burr, extending into the involved marginal ridge, extension into the central fissure, extension into the opposing marginal ridge, extension into the facial and the lingual wall, and finally you have the enameloplasty. So these are the various diagrams of the representation of the various clinical techniques. First one, you have the initial depth, the outline form and the initial depth. Now, what are the various final tooth preparation stages? Removal of the remaining defective enamel and infected dentin. That is, we have to remove any infected dentin, especially from the pulpal floor. And mainly we use a spoon excavator or slowly revolving a round carbide burr of the appropriate size. Next one is pulp protection. If the tooth preparation is more than 2 millimeter, we should provide pulp protection. In moderately deep preparations, where the remaining dentin thickness is judged to be of 0.5 to 2 millimeter, a thin layer of light activated resin modified glass ionomer cement should be placed. Procedures for finishing the external wall. The external wall already has been finished during early steps in this conservative tooth preparation for amalgam. It is always important to provide a 90-degree KO surface, which is also known as a butt joint. Final procedures of cleaning and inspection includes the completed tooth preparation should be inspected and cleaned before restoration. The tooth preparation should be free of debris after the tooth has been rinsed with the air water syringe.